Welcome to Midnight Crime Stories, where shadows speak louder than screams, and every whisper carries a truth you were never meant to hear. If you're here, you probably can't sleep. Neither can we. The footprints stopped. That's what searchers kept saying. They followed Mara's trail into the white forest for nearly a mile, and then it just stopped. No sign of a struggle, no blood. Like something lifted her off the ground and carried her into the snow. You're listening to Midnight Crime Stories, where every whisper carries a shadow, and every night holds a darker secret. She left at 10:37 p.m. Her friend Jenny remembered that precisely not because it was odd, but because she'd looked at the clock just after Mara stepped out the door and into the snow. "Let me know when you get home," Jenny had said. Mara just nodded, tugged her coat tighter around her neck, and pulled up her hood. Outside, it was snowing hard, not the soft kind that drifts and melts, but the kind that bites into your skin and muffles every sound. That kind of snow turns the world quiet. Too quiet. Mara Ellis, 17, took her first step onto the sidewalk and disappeared into the white. She never made it home. Alder Creek was the kind of town you forget existed until winter comes. A cluster of homes buried between pine trees and empty fields where wind howls through cracks in the shutters and neighbors still shovel each other's driveways. Winters in Vermont aren't kind, and this year the snow came early. The storm that hit on December 14th hadn't been forecasted. It moved in quickly, almost too quickly, and blanketed the town with 2 feet of powder in less than 3 hours. Mara had stayed longer than she meant to. She and Jenny had been watching old horror movies in the basement, trading popcorn and gossip. Nothing remarkable, nothing dangerous. But around 10:30, Mara's phone buzzed. A message from her mom. Home soon, just 3 words. But Mara knew better than to wait too long. She said goodbye, pulled on her boots, and stepped into the storm. Mara's house was less than a mile away, about a 15-minute walk, if she cut across the frozen soccer field and took the trail behind Alder Pines Middle School. It wasn't a dangerous path. Even in the dark, she'd walked it dozens of times. The trail was marked with old wooden signs, and the snow-covered trees leaned overhead like sleeping giants. Most nights, you'd hear the distant hum of a snowplow or maybe the faraway bark of someone's dog. But not that night. That night there was nothing. No wind, no echo, no sound at all. She was last seen by a neighbor who lived on Clover Drive, an old man named Earl Timmons. He said he saw Mara at exactly 10:52 p.m. She was crossing the street head down, bundled in her coat. He waved. She didn't wave back. "I figured she was just cold," he said later. "Didn't think much of it." Poor girl. That was the last known sighting. After that, silence. By 11:45 p.m., her mom texted again, then called. No answer. Then again. Still nothing. By midnight, she was standing on the porch in her robe, scanning the Snowfall phone in hand. She called Jenny, then Jenny's mom, then 911. The first responders arrived by 12:22 a.m. They found no signs of Mara on the path. But the snow was thick and undisturbed. A tracker from the local fire department, a man named Caleb, spotted the first boot prints at the edge of the trail. They were hers, he said. Teen girl size, straight pattern. She wasn't running. They followed them. Past the first curve, through the grove of bent trees, over a tiny footbridge no longer visible beneath the snow. And then they stopped. Just like that, the tracks just stopped. There were no drag marks, no scattered prints in other directions, just a clean, crisp end. One step, then nothing. Fresh snow lay ahead, untouched. It was like she'd vanished mid-step, like she'd never existed at all. The next morning, search teams expanded the grid. Drones, dogs, helicopters. The snow kept falling. They found nothing. But something strange happened on the morning of day 2. At 5:47 a.m., Jenny received a text from Mara's number. It said, "I'm okay." Just that. No punctuation, no follow-up. Police traced the signal to a tower 12 miles north near Old Pine Ridge. But by the time they arrived, there was no sign of anyone. The number went dark. The phone was never recovered. That's when people in Alder Creek started whispering, started remembering. Because 5 years earlier, almost to the day, another girl had vanished in a snowstorm. Her name was Lacey Brent. She was 16. She'd been walking home from a friend's cabin and never made it back. They'd followed her footprints, too, and those had also stopped. People tried to rationalize it. Snow can cover tracks, wind can shift things, phones can glitch. But there was something about the way the footprints stopped, not faded, stopped, that unnerved even the most practical minds, as if the snow hadn't erased her path, as if something had pulled her straight up into the air. The forest near Alder Pines was closed off. Deputies patrolled in pairs. Flyers were stapled to trees and mailboxes, and every night more snow fell, and more silence crept in. Mara's mother didn't speak to reporters, but her father, he said one thing only, and it chilled everyone who heard it. She told me once he whispered. When she was a little girl, she said the snow could whisper. She said it called to her. Alder Creek is not the kind of town that gets put on maps. It's not the kind of place that has a theme song or tourist board, but it stays there quietly tucked into the ribs of Vermont's northern forest, surrounded by old pine and frost-covered fences. It has 4 churches, 1 post office, and a diner that never changes the specials. The people here, they're kind in a distant sort of way. They wave when they see you on the road. They know your dog's name. But they don't ask questions, especially not in winter. Winters here, they last longer than they should. Snow comes early, stays late. It creeps in around the windows and chews through the seams of your coat. It mutes everything, the wind, the birds, even the sound of your own breath. And during a storm, Alder Creek becomes something else entirely, something slower, something that waits. The town has always had stories. They weren't written down, just whispered between people who'd lived here long enough to know which places you don't go after dark. There's the old mill burned down in '79. There's Maple Hollow Road, where they say lights float between the trees. And there's Pine Ridge, the stretch of woods north of town where snow always falls heavier and footsteps don't echo. The Disappearance. No one talks about before Mara, there was Lacey Brent, 16. Bright smile. Ran track for the high school. She vanished on December 13th, 5 years earlier. Same conditions, same forest, same lack of evidence. They found her scarf tied around a tree branch, clean, untorn, just left there. The footprints ended too same as Mara. The case went cold, no suspects, no leads, no body. Her parents moved away within months. Some say they couldn't bear the silence. Others think they knew something they never said. Now with Mara missing, it's all coming back. The radio hosts avoid the topic, but the grocery store murmurs louder every day. A girl missing in the snow once is tragedy. Twice, that feels like something else. The family that waits in quiet. Mara's parents live at the end of a long frozen cul-de-sac in a 2-story house with green shutters and an always flickering porch light. It still flickers now like it's trying to call her home. Her mother, Eleanor, hasn't spoken to the press, but those who know her say she hasn't moved from the kitchen table in days. She just sits there, fingers wrapped around a cold mug, staring at the driveway like she expects Mara to come walking up it at any moment. She whispers her name sometimes. Over and over. Mara's father, Daniel, is quieter. Even before the disappearance, he was a soft-spoken man, worked maintenance at the local school, fixed old radios in the garage. But now he walks. Just walks. Through the snow, past the woods, down roads with no lights. He doesn't take his phone. Sometimes he doesn't wear gloves. As if cold doesn't bother him anymore. As if it's not the worst thing he's feeling. What the diary revealed. On the 4th day, Mara's friend Jenny gave police something she hadn't told anyone about. It was a red notebook worn and tucked behind some books in Mara's old backpack. A kind of journal, half poetry, half thoughts. Most of it was what you'd expect, fragments about school loneliness, college dreams. But on the second to last page, dated 3 days before she vanished, was a single paragraph that no one could quite explain. It read, "There's a man in the snow. I don't know how I know, but I do. He doesn't leave tracks. He doesn't blink. I saw him standing by the tree line where the trail splits. I thought he was gone, but now I think he never left. Police said it was likely imagination, just winter anxiety. Teen girls write strange things. But Jenny swore Mara wasn't the type to lie, especially not to paper, the woman who saw too much. Her name was Carla Finch. She worked night shifts at the town gas station just outside Alder Creek. She called the sheriff's department on the night Mara vanished, left a voicemail. No one called her back. She came in person the next day shaken. What she said didn't make sense, but she repeated it word for word. I saw someone in the road. Not the girl. Someone else. Just standing there. Still. At the edge of the woods. Not moving. And the snow wasn't falling around him. It was like it slid off. They asked if it could have been a trick of light. She said maybe, but she was sure the snow didn't touch him. And when she blinked, he was gone. A town on edge. In the days that followed, Alder Creek changed. People locked their doors earlier. Curtains stayed drawn. Kids weren't allowed to walk home alone even in daylight. No new footprints appeared, but everyone felt watched, like something had cracked open, and something colder than snow had slipped through. The letter left behind, on day 7. A letter arrived at the Ellis home. No return address, no stamp, just left on the porch. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, not handwritten. It said, "She went into the trees. She followed the whisper. Don't follow her. The forest doesn't lie." They called it Pine Ridge, but to the locals it had another name, one they rarely said out loud, Dead Man's Fold. Not because anyone could prove someone had died there, but because those woods seemed to keep things, sounds, whispers, footsteps that never belonged to you. Children in Alder Creek were raised with the warning, "Don't go past the second gate." It was just a saying, until Mara disappeared. The gate they shouldn't have opened. On day 8 of the search authorities made the call. They were expanding the perimeter beyond Pine Ridge Trail, even into what the locals considered the deep woods. 24 volunteers suited up. All of them experienced hikers, wilderness-trained, GPS-equipped. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees. The snow was shoulder-deep in some spots. But still, they went in. Among them was Caleb Monroe, the same volunteer who had first discovered Mara's footprints. He would later say, "I've tracked missing people through flash floods and summer fires, but I've never heard silence like that. It felt like we were walking into something ancient." Strange signs in the pines. 3 miles into the ridge, something strange appeared. A small circle of stones, neatly placed, moss-covered even under the snow. At the center, a single leafless branch jammed upright into the frozen ground, wrapped in twine. Next to it, half buried, a torn piece of red fabric frozen into the ice. It matched the lining of Mara's coat, but there were no footprints leading to it. Not fresh ones. Not old ones. It was just there. The search team radioed it in, photographed the site, marked it on GPS, and then kept going another 800 yards to a clearing known as Bell Hollow. They found more there. The second clue, it was a mitten. Children's size, blue, striped, too small for Mara, but what chilled the searchers wasn't the size. It was that it had been set on a flat stone perfectly centered, as if it had been placed there deliberately, as if someone wanted it to be found. The mitten was dry, completely untouched by the snow, which was impossible. It had been snowing all week. No one had an explanation. The searchers grew quiet. Some wanted to turn back. Caleb insisted they keep moving, at least another mile. The prints that didn't belong. At 4:42 p.m., just before they lost daylight, they found something else. Tracks, but not Mara's. Larger, heavier, 2 sets. One of them human, booted. The other, not quite. It was longer than a foot, bare, with 5 visible indentations. Not paw-like, not quite human either. Whatever made them, walked beside the booted prints for at least 30 feet, and then veered off into the forest. The team voted to mark the location and return the next morning. It was getting dark. and they were starting to feel something none of them wanted to admit. Fear. Not fear of getting lost, not fear of wild animals, but a quiet humming dread, the kind that grows behind your ears and down your spine. The kind that doesn't ask you to run but whispers, "You're not supposed to be here." The voice in the recording. That night, back at the sheriff's office, a ranger named Naomi was reviewing audio logs from the team's body cams. She paused, one at the 4:12 timestamp. A subtle static had built up, probably from interference, but underneath it, there was something else. A whisper, low, breathless. It was Mara's name. "Mara!" said once, then again, then something else hard to make out. A sound. Maybe just wind, or maybe a second voice breathing in response. What the locals know. The sheriff called in one more person the next morning, May Holloway, 76, town historian, widow of a former ranger, and one of the last people who remembered the original Pine Ridge disappearances. Because yes, there had been others. Before Lacey, before Mara, before the town even had a name. 3 girls in the winter of 1944, all gone. Same age, same path. No bodies, no clues, just snow and silence. May brought a journal, her grandmother's. Inside was a handwritten entry. The girl stepped into the ridge and vanished. Her brother said she heard a lullaby in the wind, and then she followed it. The backpack in the tree. When the team returned to Bell Hollow the next morning, they saw it instantly. A black object hanging 20 feet up, swinging from the highest branch of an old pine tree. It was a backpack. Inside, a water bottle, a folded note, and Mara's school ID. The note read, "Snow doesn't cover everything. Something moves in the snow that night." Caleb, the volunteer tracker, couldn't sleep. He stepped outside for air. And there in the fresh snowfall on his porch were wet footprints. Bare, human, leading to his front door. But no prints leading away. He checked the cameras. Nothing. Just a low sound like wind or breathing. You're listening to Midnight Crime Stories, where every whisper carries a shadow, and every night holds a darker secret. The Last Call. On the night of her disappearance, Mara placed one phone call at 10:56 p.m. It went unanswered. She dialed again. This time her mother picked up. But Mara didn't say hello. She whispered, "Wait, there's someone." Then the line went silent. Call duration 5 seconds. Location pinged, edge of Bell Hollow. Investigators pulled the audio from emergency logs and played it back. At first there was nothing, just static, wind. Then Mara's voice, low, shaky, and then something else. Something layered beneath her breathing. A second voice, barely audible, almost a hum. Forensic technicians cleaned the audio, slowed it by 30%. The second voice became clearer. Not a sentence, not words, just a rhythmic inhale, almost like someone smelling, rewinding silence. Detective Clara Mahoney listened to the tape 10 times that night, not because she thought she'd missed something, but because the tape felt wrong. She'd heard people scream before. Panic. Fear. This wasn't that. Mara didn't sound terrified. She sounded entranced, not frozen in fear, frozen in stillness, as if she'd seen something so strange, so impossible. She couldn't even begin to run. Digital dust. They examined her phone records again. Something stuck out. On the day before she vanished, Mara had dialed an unknown number 3 times in a row. The number was unlisted. Burner, prepaid. The texts she sent were later recovered through CloudSync. They read, "Are you still watching? I saw you at the trees. Why won't you answer now?" There were no replies, except for one, sent at 3:14 a.m. the night she disappeared. From the burner. One word, follow. The interview nobody played on air local news tried to stay away from speculation. But on day 12, a journalist aired a short segment that included a blurred interview with someone claiming to be a forest local. His voice was altered, his face obscured. But what he said chilled everyone. It's not the cold that takes them. It's the silence. The snow covers a lot, but not everything. You can still hear it if you're quiet enough. The anchor asked, "What do you mean?" He responded, "Sometimes it walks in step with you, until you notice there are too many footsteps. And by then, you're part of it. The station pulled the clip within an hour. No record of who the man was. The footage was lost. But locals remembered. They always remember. The journal revisited. Jenny Mara's best friend returned to the sheriff's office on day 13th. She brought the journal again. "I missed a page," she said. "I didn't think it meant anything." But now, on the torn back page, scribbled hastily, almost like an afterthought, were 5 words. "If I disappear, bury it." And underneath, like a child's scrawl. "It doesn't like cameras." Investigators asked what she meant. Jenny shook her head. "I think she thought something was watching her, but only when she was alone." The radio static incident. A couple on the edge of town, Nora and Travis Finley, reported something strange to police. They owned an old ham radio, mostly for hobby use. That night around 2:00 a.m., they heard a voice cutting through static. Unintelligible at first, then one word repeated 3 times. "Stop, stop, stop!" followed by deep, wet breathing. And then silence. Travis, a former military radio tech, said it wasn't interference. He was certain the signal was local, and that it came from the woods. The transmission was never recovered. The shadow in the still frame. Detective Mahoney reviewed body cam footage from the search near Bell Hollow. At timestamp 17:08, during a 3-second camera pan across a frozen creek, something flickered. Frame by frame, they isolated it. It wasn't clear. It wasn't close. But it was tall, thin, wrong. It stood between 2 trees. No snow settled on it. Just a black silhouette, no facial features. And then in the next frame, gone, they checked GPS and time logs. None of the searchers had been near that position. Lights in the woods, 3 hikers, unrelated to the case, reported seeing lights in the forest 2 nights after Mara's disappearance. Soft blue, not flickering, stationary. They didn't approach, but they said the light pulsed, like breath. One hiker took a photo. The image was blurred, but in the center, faintly, you could see what looked like a face. Long, expressionless, no eyes, just a blank space where a mouth might be. The breathing returns. On day 15th, Clara Mahoney decided to listen to the 5-second call again, this time with headphones, at night, alone. She turned up the volume, closed her eyes, and there in the static she heard it again, not just breathing, not just whispering, but humming, soft, low, almost musical. And just before the end of the call, as Mara's voice cuts out, a second voice says one word, not shouted, not growled, just spoken. "Here." And then, stillness. There were no more texts, no more leads, no more evidence. Mara was still missing. The snow kept falling, but everyone felt it. Something had changed. Alder Creek went silent again. Locked windows, drawn blinds. Parents walked their kids to school even at noon. And deep in the woods, beneath a tree no one marked on any map, a single red thread hangs from a branch. It moves sometimes, even when there's no wind. The shelter was never on any map. It wasn't marked by the forestry department, not registered to any family, not even visible on Google Earth. But it was real and cold. The metal door was sunken beneath layers of pine needles, half frozen over, buried under years of quiet. It was a park ranger named Eliza Brandt who found it on accident. She'd been tracing a broken footpath beyond Bell Hollow, searching for new weather damage after the latest freeze. She stepped on the hatch. It made no sound, just a subtle groan under her boots like something waking from a long nap. She radioed it in. They didn't open it until the following morning. The hinges screamed. Not because they were rusted, someone had greased them recently, not recently enough, but not decades ago either. Inside it was dark. The kind of dark that feels thicker than air. The kind that doesn't clear even when you turn on your light. Flashlights swept the narrow chamber. The room was 10 feet by 12. Concrete walls, a low ceiling, no windows, no electricity. But there were signs someone had been there, and not long ago. A coat lay in the far corner, torn at the sleeve, lined with faded purple, the exact same color as Mara's, but not hers. The size was too big. The label had been scratched off. Next to it, a battered tin thermos, empty, and a plastic spoon snapped in half. But the most disturbing thing wasn't what was left behind. It was what had been carved. All along the inside of the door from floor to eye level were scratch marks. Thin, shallow, repeated. Dozens of them. Someone had tried to claw their way out. Detective Mahoney took photos, measured the scratches. They weren't made with a tool. They were too uneven, too frantic. They looked like fingernails. In the far corner above the coat, someone had carved 5 words. It waits when you're alone. No punctuation, just a warning. Or maybe a diary entry. Forensics came in that night. They found a strand of hair tangled in the coat lining. Pale blonde, root intact. But it wasn't Mara's. The DNA came back as female. No match in any system. Not missing, not wanted, not recorded. Another girl, another ghost. Back in town, people whispered about the shelter. Someone said it belonged to a man named Hollis Merton, a hunter who lived off-grid in the late 90s. Supposedly built the shelter himself after his daughter died in a winter slide. He disappeared 6 months later. No body, no goodbye. Some folks thought he'd just wandered too far. Others said he went looking for his daughter, into the ridge, and never came back. May Holloway, the town's oldest resident, said something else. She remembered Merton. Said he once told her the snow could speak, and if you listened too long, it would tell you a name. Not yours. Someone else's, and you'd follow it. She said she never believed him, but after Mara, she wasn't so sure anymore. The shelter was closed off, marked as evidence, but no one wanted to be the one to seal it. Eventually, they just put up yellow tape and left it under the trees. Even now, when wind cuts through Bell Hollow, people say they hear something metallic moving, like a latch, shifting from inside. Whoa. That same week, a child went missing for 2 hours. A boy, 7 years old, playing in his backyard near Pine Ridge. He wandered behind the house, said he saw a woman. When asked what she looked like, he said, "She didn't have a face, but she had my mom's voice." He was found crying near a tree stump 30 yards deep. There were no adult footprints, only his. The boy's drawing showed a tall figure with long arms and no features. In its chest, he drew something black, scribbled over and over. When asked what it was, he said, "That's where it sings from." Later that night, Detective Mahoney reviewed thermal drone footage from a week prior searching for heat signatures near the storm shelter. At 3:17 a.m., something showed up. Not bright, but visible. A tall shape, upright, not moving. It stood for 5 minutes just beyond the shelter, then vanished. It didn't walk, it didn't fade. It simply blinked out. Meanwhile, Mara's mother began dreaming. She said it wasn't a normal dream. She'd be in Mara's room. Lights off, window open. Snow pouring in through the opening, piling up on the carpet but not melting. In the dream, she could hear a voice, not Mara's, but close. It would say, she saw it, but she didn't listen. And then, it's quieter now. Thank you. She woke up crying every time. The coat from the shelter was later tested for blood. The forensic team found none visible, but under UV light they noticed a faint outline on the inside, lining something smeared then wiped. A fingerprint. Human. Too small to be adult, too defined to be old. But no match. They tried. Ran it through every known record. Nothing. Local legend began spinning again. Kids on Reddit threads started posting stories about the Snow Watcher, a creature they said appeared in Vermont blizzards, always near the edge of forests, never in the same place twice. The most common detail, it doesn't make noise when it moves, and it doesn't blink. One story said, it waits until you hum without knowing it. Then it answers. Whether the shelter was used as a hiding place or a trap, no one could say. But everyone agreed on one thing. Someone else had been in those woods before Mara, maybe many someones, and not all of them came back. Some may still be out there, not moving, just watching, like frost on a window, waiting to be noticed. Back at the Ellis house, Mara's father started carrying a small radio with him when he walked. He said it helped, until one night walking past the ridge, the static went silent, just for a second. Then the radio whispered, "You brought her here." He dropped it in the snow. It never turned back on. The snow kept falling, a little deeper every day, and somewhere below it, beneath tree roots, frost and ash. Someone was still listening, The snow began to melt in late February. Not much, just enough to thin the frost on the forest edge, to turn pine needles slick, to let the earth inhale again. But when the snow thaws in Alder Creek, it doesn't just uncover dirt. It remembers. It was a hiker named Callum Royce who first saw it. He wasn't from Alder Creek. Came up from Rutland for solitude. Stayed in a cabin 3 miles outside Pine Ridge. He was walking just beyond Bell Hollow when something stopped him. A boot sole, not whole, half sunk into the thawed mud. He assumed it was trash, until he noticed what was tangled beside it. Bone. Small, pale, clean. Police arrived by sundown. They cordoned the area, set up tents. The ground was delicate, too soft to dig deeply, too wet to bring in dogs. But what they found was not Mara. The remains were partial, estimated to be 4 to 6 years old, female, teenage. Forensics later confirmed it. Lacey Brent, the girl who vanished 5 years ago. No signs of trauma on the skull, no defensive wounds, nothing to suggest violence. But something was wrong. Her femur, the strongest bone in the body, was broken clean. Not cracked, not splintered. Snapped, as if twisted. But the break showed no swelling. No healing, as if it had happened after. They found her jacket 20 feet away, dry, preserved under layers of frozen mulch. Inside the pocket, a folded note, water-damaged, faded. But 4 words were still visible. Don't look behind trees. The town mourned again. Flags at half-staff. Photos returned to the school hallway. But the grief was complicated. Because with Lacey's body found, they no longer had hope. But with Mara still missing, they no longer had peace. Detective Mahoney walked the perimeter that night. Alone. She brought a lantern, refused to use her flashlight. She stopped at the ridge line, knelt in the moss, and whispered, "We found one. Let the other go." The forest said nothing back, but the wind shifted. 2 days later, someone broke into the sheriff's station. Nothing was stolen, no doors forced, no alarms triggered, but one file was pulled, set on the floor of the evidence room. Mara Ellis, case 047. On top of the file, a single pine cone, wrapped in red thread. No fingerprints, no explanation. Jenny, Mara's best friend, returned to her therapist. She said she couldn't sleep. She'd been dreaming again. But it wasn't of Mara. It was of trees, stacked too close, with shadows standing in the spaces between them like soldiers who didn't know which way to face. One shadow would always turn and whisper her name, but not in Mara's voice. It used her father's. The forest was closed again. No one walked Pine Ridge. Drones replaced boots. And one drone on March 3rd caught something strange. At 6:41 p.m., its camera froze. Not glitched, frozen. Stuck on a single frame. When the frame was pulled from memory, it showed a clearing. Empty. But in the lower right corner, a footprint. Bare, not deep, fresh. They mapped the location, returned the next day. The footprint was gone, of course, but something else had taken its place. A set of 5 rocks, stacked in a perfect spiral. Inside the center, a small piece of paper, folded tight. Words printed in red. She is listening. The forensic psychologist brought onto the case, Dr. Ray Calder, proposed something different. Not a killer, not a stalker, but a pattern. Some trauma repeats itself, he said, when it's unrecognized. Like memory echoing. He called it recursive grief. The kind of sorrow that builds a myth because the truth is unbearable. But even he paused when asked about the notes. Delusion doesn't leave footprints, he said, not barefoot ones. A school janitor later came forward with a box. He said he'd cleaned out Mara's locker after the first month. He didn't want to, but policy required it. He'd kept one thing, didn't know why. A drawing. He gave it to Mahoney. The drawing showed a figure, thin, armless, with roots instead of legs. It stood beside a tree, and in the tree, hidden in the branches, was Mara. Her eyes were wide, but her mouth wasn't drawn, just a black mark like she'd been erased. Mahoney hung the drawing in her office. Didn't know why. But every time she looked at it, she felt cold. Not scared, just wrong. Like the moment right before you realize you forgot to lock your door. Mara's room remained untouched. Her mother still left the window cracked, just slightly. She said it felt wrong to close it. One night she swore she heard music, like a lullaby. Too slow to recognize, too soft to trace. It played for 30 seconds. then stopped. No phone, no devices, just silence. And when she looked at the floor the next morning, snow, just a few flakes, inside the room. They hadn't melted. The first thing her mother noticed was the door. It was open. She didn't remember opening it. Since Mara disappeared, she'd kept the door half closed, just enough to let in air, not enough to see the full emptiness inside. But that morning, it was wide. The air felt wrong. Not cold, still, like the room had been holding its breath. The snow on the floor from the night before had melted. No puddle, no moisture. Just gone. She stood in the doorway, heart slow. Her hands stayed by her sides. And then she saw it. The closet light was on. She never turned it on. In fact, it hadn't worked in years. But now it glowed dim like the bulb itself was remembering how to shine. Inside the closet, resting against the back wall, was Mara's backpack. The same one recovered from the tree weeks ago. But here it was again. Dry, intact, zipped. She stepped back, called Detective Mahoney. The backpack was collected, tested, scanned. It wasn't a duplicate. It was the same one. Same water damage on the corner seam, same torn zipper, same contents. Almost. One item had been added, a Polaroid. The image was dark, blurry, framed from inside Mara's room, facing the window. In the photo, Mara stood with her back to the glass. She was barefoot, hair down, wearing a thin white shirt one her mother didn't recognize. But the window behind her, it wasn't the window in that room. It was wider, taller, and outside it, trees. Not the pine trees near their home. Something denser, darker. There was no timestamp. No fingerprint on the photo. The camera it was taken with unknown. But tucked behind the photo was a note. Typed, all lowercase, 4 words. We said don't follow. That night at exactly 2:17 a.m., Mara's phone connected to the Wi-Fi for 5 seconds, then disconnected. The router log confirmed it. No MAC address appeared. No device name, just a flicker like something passing through. The following morning, her mother received a voicemail. From Mara's number. It was 3 seconds long. No voice, just breathing. Not rushed, not afraid. Steady. On the second, there's a tap. Soft, like a fingernail brushing plastic. Then silence. Mahoney had the phone analyzed. It hadn't been turned on. Not in weeks. Battery dead, card removed. But something had used it. That same week, 2 classmates of Mara's reported receiving texts from her old number. Both messages said the same thing. I'm still under it. No punctuation. No follow-up. When they tried to reply, the number bounced back. Out of service. The forensic team re-examined Mara's laptop. In the system cache, they found an image that hadn't been opened, saved at 3:04 a.m. 3 nights before she vanished. It was a sketch, drawn digitally. A shape standing in the woods. Long legs, sloped shoulders, no head. Instead, its neck extended upward into the sky, becoming part of the trees. And underneath the drawing, she wrote, "It doesn't look down because it never has to." Jenny returned to Mara's house on March 11th. She brought a shoebox. Inside were handwritten notes, things Mara had passed to her in class. Most were jokes, song lyrics, doodles. But one stood out, folded in thirds. It read, "Do you ever dream of someone before you know them, and then see them later standing in the corner of your room?" On the back she'd written, "It's not a dream, it's a rehearsal." Later that night, Jenny checked her voicemail. There was one new message, time-stamped at 2:01 a.m. Again, just breathing, but this time, something else. A song! Faint, off-key. Twinkle, Twinkle slowed down to the point of unease. And one more thing. Near the end, Mara's voice whispered, "Don't open the red door?" Jenny had no idea what that meant. Until the next morning when she got home from school, and her front closet, the one they'd painted red years ago, was open. Inside was nothing except for her scarf, the one Mara had borrowed before she vanished. It smelled like pine. Back at the Ellis home, the lights began flickering. Not constantly, only once a night. Always at 3:03 a.m. Just the bedroom. Nowhere else. No electrical fault found. Mahoney set up a motion camera. It recorded for 72 hours. Nothing on night 1. Nothing on night 2. On night 3 at 3:03 a.m., the light flicked. Then the door creaked. Not wide, just slightly, as if someone peeked in. Then a figure, not fully visible, only the side of a face, pale, still, the mouth too wide, and the eye black. Then the light shut off. The camera died. They found no trace of tampering, no signs of entry, no explanation. Just a question. If Mara was still reaching out, then where was she reaching from? The envelope arrived without a stamp. No name, no return address, just cream-colored paper folded once slipped into the mail slot of the Alder Creek Sheriff's Office. Detective Mahoney found it at 6:14 a.m. resting alone on the mat. Inside was a single sheet, a map, hand-drawn in black ink. Crisp, detailed, but old. It showed Pine Ridge, not as it is now, but as it used to be decades ago, before the roads were paved, before the trails were logged. A red X was marked northeast of Bell Hollow just beyond the storm shelter. Below it, written in sharp, uneven block letters, "She isn't alone." The coordinates didn't align with anything known. No ranger post, no private cabin, no hiking route. But there was a clearing, unmarked, remote, hard to reach without snowshoes. They planned a team, 3 officers, 1 tracker, Mahoney included. They left at dawn, marched for 3 hours, reached the site by noon. The clearing wasn't empty. It wasn't overgrown. It wasn't natural. It was circular, roughly 30 feet wide, surrounded by pines bent outward away from the center, as if something had pushed them. No footprints, no animals, no sound. At the center, a burned circle, ash, still fresh. And in the ash, bones, small, animal, arranged in a spiral, carefully, deliberately. And one more thing, a word, drawn into the soot with a finger. Follow. They took samples, photographed the scene, marked it for grid search. But just as they were leaving, Mahoney heard something. Not a voice, a sound. Like humming, low, like a lullaby half forgotten, coming from the trees, from nowhere. Then a crack, to the left. They turned. Nothing there, only trees and snow. But in the distance, just visible past the bend, a figure. It wasn't moving. It was standing between 2 trees, half in shadow. No coat, no color, just stillness. Mahoney raised her hand. One of the officers shouted. The figure tilted its head. Not quickly, not with force, just slightly like a puppet being tested for weight. Then it stepped back. Not turned, stepped, and disappeared behind the trunk. They chased. But when they reached the spot, nothing. No tracks, no prints, just 2 pine cones placed side by side, pointing toward the north slope. They followed. Not because they should have, but because they had to. 15 minutes into the descent, the wind picked up. Fast. The snow turned sharp, air tighter. And then, the tree. It stood alone. Dead, no branches. Charred black but never burned. At its base, a hole. Not dug, split. The earth had opened, caved inward. It was just wide enough for a person. Mahoney dropped to one knee, shined her light inside. Empty. Except, at the far end, a glint. Glass. She reached in, pulled it out. A phone. Dead, cracked, but unmistakable. Mara's. They rushed back to town. Reactivated the phone. Charged it under secure conditions. It powered on. 5 photos appeared, all taken on December 17th, 2 days after she disappeared. No GPS, no metadata. The images were all the same. Darkness, with a shape in the center. Each time the shape grew closer. A silhouette. And in the last photo, a hand. Pale. Reaching toward the camera. The skin was wrong, too smooth, no creases, and no fingernails. Just soft white ends, as if made from snow. The phone had one voice memo. 12 seconds. Mara's voice. She whispers. I didn't follow it. I didn't say yes, but it found the place in me that would have. Breath. Then, it remembers. It doesn't forgive. But it waits. Silence. Then something else. Not her voice. A breath. Not hers, but too close. And one word. Not loud, but final. Closer. They closed the phone, sealed it again. No further data could be extracted. No signal, no recovery. That night, the lights in town flickered, all at once. 7 seconds, then normal. But in every house that flickered, something strange happened. A photo fell. A drawer opened. A door unlatched. Small things. But all of them happened at exactly 3:03 a.m. And in the Ellis house, something new appeared. On Mara's window, fingerprints. From the inside, just 5, barely visible, but cold to the touch. The snow returned on April 1st. Late, unexpected, heavy, blanketing Alder Creek, with an eerie silence thick enough to dull footsteps and sound alike. It covered the streets, the trees, the storm shelter. It erased the clearing beyond Bell Hollow, and it filled Mara's window frame until all her mother could see was white. It felt like a reset, or a warning. At 3:02 a.m., her phone rang. Just once. No caller ID, no sound. When she answered, the line was dead. But on the voicemail left 2 seconds later, there was something. A whisper. Not a word, a name. Drawn out, delicate. Mara. The call came from inside the county server system. It shouldn't have been possible. The time log said internal ping. No number, no source. Only a coordinate string. North 446361 West 72.8873. Back in the forest. They followed it. No team this time. Just Mahoney and Caleb the tracker, who found her footprints the first day. They left at dawn, arrived by mid-morning. The snow had already begun to melt. It revealed what looked like a ring, 12 stones, evenly spaced, each carved with a different mark, worn symbols that didn't match any known language. Inside the ring, ash and a cassette recorder. Analog, old, covered in frost, still warm. The tape was intact, no label. They played it that night in a secure room. It started with static, faint, consistent. Then Mara's voice, calm, whispered, "If you're hearing this, I waited too long. I didn't follow it." But it followed me. Into dreams, into mirrors, into the spaces behind my breath. A pause. It doesn't take you like people think, not with force, not with speed. It waits until the part of you that wants to disappear lets it in. A long exhale. Then, I think it used to be a person. Or maybe something a person left behind. Grief, maybe. So much of it grew skin and snow and teeth. A soft crackle. Tell them I'm not cold. Tell them I remember. Tell them I went quietly. Not because I was afraid, but because I was already halfway gone. Then silence. No ending. No scream. Just one final breath, then a second voice, not hers, low, shallow, and one last word, stay. They kept the tape locked away. No copies, no leaks, but the story still got out. Not all of it. Not the details, just the pieces people could hold. That she might still be somewhere. That she might have chosen it. That maybe in the middle of the snowfall, she found peace. But that's not what Mahoney believed. She played the tape every night for a week. Then she stopped. The last night she listened, she heard something different. Not in the tape, in the house. She paused it halfway through, heard footsteps in the hall, checked the security system. No doors had opened, no windows, but the floorboards near Mara's room had creaked. Once, then again, like someone pacing. The next morning on her kitchen counter, she found a note. Not handwritten, typed, old typewriter ink uneven on the paper. It read, she doesn't need a door anymore. The room is sealed now, not by tape, not by force. Just closed, like a chapter you can't reread. Not because it's over, but because it's become part of you. The people of Alder Creek still walk slower in winter. Still glance twice at the woods when snow falls heavy and sudden. Still listen at night when the wind stops, for the hum beneath the silence. Some say they see her. Not often, not clearly. But every once in a while, a figure appears through the trees, not walking, just standing. And when they blink, she's gone. But the snow near her feet stays melted, like it remembers her weight, like she was never really gone. Just waiting to be seen. Thank you for listening to Midnight Crime Stories. Subscribe for more whispered true crime tales to accompany your sleepless nights.